ソリザードンテラバースト
Hey everyone, it's Mark. This is my recap for Pokémon Horizons episode 25, Rivals in the Dark Night. This was the 1257th episode of the Pokemon anime and the final episode of the Liko and Roy set off chapter of Horizons. We've got to talk about this climactic episode as well as the special preview for the next chapter, so let's get started already. The episode starts right where we left off with the explorers arriving at the castle. Elsewhere, we see these three explorers members making their way over via helicopter, and the admins are ready to fight. This is our first real insight into their personalities, and I gotta say I'm not loving Sango. She's kind of annoying, but I think that actually makes her a good villain because I'm already rooting against her. Hamber informs Onyx and Sango that neither of them will be rushing into battle right away. He's saving them as a last resort. With that, let's turn our attention back to the old castle in Breezy Hills. Liko is telling Terapagos to hold back, and Amethio picks up on the fact that Terapagos must be this Pokemon's name. And while I might have thought Terapagos would be more timid, it actually seems fired up and raring to go, which is interesting. After that, we cut to the opening, which I only point out because this is the last episode for Heart Pounding Diary as the opening. It was a pretty good song, but definitely outside of my top 5 Japanese openings, maybe just sneaking into my top 10 though. Back to the action, and we see Diana's Arcanine jump straight into the line of fire. Diana isn't too far behind, and she tells the others to run, while she has to grab something important. She turns her attention to these goons, and Zerk lets it slip that they're the explorers, which Diana certainly wasn't expecting. It seems to be a running theme this episode that characters are unintentionally revealing too much information. The time for talking is over though, as Amethio readies an attack, only for Diana to hop on Arcanine's back and jump straight through a glass window. Okay then, that's one way to make an escape. Elsewhere in the castle, the Rising Voltaclers are regrouping in a secret tunnel. Liko recalls the tenant to his Pokeball, and we don't see it again for the rest of this episode. They get a move on once Zerk's Rhydon crashes through the floor, and it sees which direction they're running. Their destination was one of the corner towers of the castle, and they all run up the stairs. Amethio was fine with this, telling Zerk and Onya to surround them on the ground while he chases them from the skies. This trio is also splitting up, with Freed telling the kids to stay put while he tries to call Murdoch. While we see Freed attempt to call his friend, we don't actually see if the call goes through. Amethio makes his epic entrance on top of his Corviknight, to which Freed just taunts him by saying he's busy on the phone. Amethio is furious at this disrespect, and Freed ends up challenging him to a battle, but not before he jumps off the tower. No, like seriously, he straight up leaps off the tower, and sure, he calls out Charizard on his way down, and even gives Liko and Roy a wink. So cheesy that this kind of ruined the dramatic moment for me, although this is classic Freed. He and Amethio eventually meet down on the rooftop of the castle, and Freed questions if Amethio is really going to fight him 2-on-1. Amethio recalls his Corviknight, making it a fair fight. There's a lot going on in this episode with tons of cutaways to other parts of the castle. We see Diana putting a ton of books into her bag along with this strange looking belt, which we'll talk about at the end of this video. But for now, back to Freed versus Amethio, and Freed is cautious not to attack Ceruledge directly, not wanting to activate its Weak Armor ability. Weak Armor only activates when a Pokemon is hit by a physical move, so Freed as Charizard keep his distance and aims several special attacks at Ceruledge, which causes Amethio to ask what Freed is doing since this isn't his usual battling style. Freed keeps his composure though, not wavering from his strategy. Well, until like 5 seconds later when Freed completely abandons his strategy and calls for a Dragon Claw, which nails Ceruledge and does some serious damage, but also activates Weak Armor, sharply boosting Ceruledge's speed. Freed knows Amethio is outplaying him at this point, and we see Ceruledge take advantage by overwhelming Charizard with a flurry of attacks. Diana hears some of the action going on outside, but before she can join the fray, a Dusknoir shows up right in front of her, with Hamber making his presence known. They use this moment as a dramatic cut to commercial, and when we come back from the ad break, the focus is on Freed and Amethio once again, with Ceruledge currently dominating. Freed didn't expect things to go this way, but just as Ceruledge is charging up for the finishing blow, it's time for Charizard to surpass its potential as Freed whips out his Terra Orb, terrestrializing his Charizard for just the second time in this series. Amethio is completely taken aback by this turn of events. He clearly did not expect Freed to terrestrialize his Pokemon. Liko and Roy are also amazed with this being the first time they've seen Freed use this technique as well. Ceruledge's Psycho Cut is useless against the now Dark-type Charizard, and I guess Amethio is at least familiar with the terrestrial phenomenon, and he's about to be real familiar with the move Terra Blast as Charizard unleashes an absolutely devastating strike on his Ceruledge. It's super effective, and it knocks Ceruledge out. Bingo! Well, not quite a bingo just yet, but this does check off the second bingo tile on the Elite Trainer Mark Pokemon Horizons bingo card, because Amethio and Freed finally finished one of their battles. Maybe Amethio should not have tried to win straight up in a one-on-one battle, because Freed certainly didn't hold back in using his Terra Orb out of nowhere. He explains that Amethio forced him to stop holding back, which I guess is a compliment, and now Fuecoco just has all the more reason to be amazed by its idol, Charizard. They're cut off by Amethio's subordinates as Zerk has finally caught up to them. Liko is pretty scared, but Sprigatito gives her the courage to keep on moving. The kids make their way down a ladder to the castle grounds, but Zerk and Onia surround them just as Amethio instructed. The kids jump right into action, with Sprigatito easily able to get the upper hand on Onia's Golduck, knocking it out after a Leafage plus Quick Attack combo. Yeah, that was easy. Zerk tells Rhydon to aim a Mega Horn at Sprigatito. That's gonna hurt, but luckily Roy and Fuecoco save the day by intercepting Rhydon with Stomping Tantrum. Zerk is about to call for Sandstorm and in the process out himself as a massive Nidothing fan. This potentially amazing moment is interrupted by the sight of some wild Pokemon walking into the area covered in some kind of salt. Onia immediately recognizes this as Salt here, which means Onix and his Garganacl must be nearby. For now though, let's check back in with Diana, who questions Hamber about being part of the Explorers. She doesn't understand why they would target them since the Explorers used to be Lucius's friends. Whoa, that's a twist. Their conversation is interrupted by Sango and Onix's antics outside, which gives Diana a chance to flee. Hamber remarks that even though he told them to stand by, he's not surprised that they didn't listen. However, he is surprised to get a phone call, and it's from Master Gibeon. We see Onix and Garganacl continue to wreak havoc, and the sight of what is either salt, snow, or hail causes Amethio to recognize that the other admins are here, calling them troublemakers. Zerk and Onia decide to get out of dodge, but Liko and Roy are still in danger as Sango confronts them with Onix not far behind. Yeah, this isn't looking so good for our heroes, but whoa, hold on, what is that? Arriving in a flash, it's Cap, here to save the day once again. He drills Glalie with a Thunder Punch, and the tables have well and truly turned as the Bravasagi flies into view overhead. Obviously, Murdoch got Freed's call. Freed, Liko, and Roy all get called by Murdoch, who asked if they are okay before telling them that Metagross is coming down to pick up Liko and Roy. They make their escape from danger while Cap stays put, ready to battle. Sango completely loses her cool at this point, and clearly she's got a bit of a short fuse, calling for Blizzard, which Cap dodges. Garganacl fires Assault Cure, which I have no idea how that's a physical attack, but nonetheless, Pikachu evades it while charging up Volt Tackle, which lands head-on, completely obliterating Garganacl. Onix can't believe what he just saw, and yeah, so much for being a defensive wall. Seeing this, Sango turns back to look at Captain Pikachu, and, well, I think these screenshots of her facial expressions do a better job than my words ever could. This girl is definitely off her rocker. Onix knows something bad is about to happen, and sure enough, Sango calls for self-destruct. As a complete side note, the initial translation by some stuffs had this move as Explosion, so I'm guessing many of you watched this episode and saw Glalie use Explosion, but in fact this was self-destruct. Well, this was just a minor translation change, it still caused a major explosion, which Cap just about manages to avoid thanks to Freed and Charizard. Liko wonders out loud if her grandmother was able to stay out of harm's way, and oh, would you look at that, it's Diana and Arcanine jumping so high into the sky that they land on the Bravasagi's wing deck, which, wow, I mean, that had to have been like a 100-foot jump into the air from Arcanine. Sheesh. The rising Voltacklers make their escape as daybreak hits, and we see Onix and Sango talk about their failure, and in the only Sango moment I actually liked in this episode, she says everything's fine because, and I quote, demolition is a hoot. Yeah, I was being intentionally punny earlier when I said this girl has a short fuse. Zerk and Onia watch on as Amethio stares off at the Bravasagi, but the scene shifts now as we jump ahead a little bit to later in the day. Now safe from any danger, Diana gives Liko one of Lucius's memoirs, and she reads off basically the same words that we heard at the very start of episode 1 of Horizons, complete with the same visuals. Diana says Lucius's adventures are now just thought to be fairy tales, but she and Liko believe them all to be real. Diana tells Liko to seek out the 6 heroes, and whoa, hold on to your hats folks, Diana's about to name all 6 heroes, starting with the ones we already know, followed by Lapras, okay, no shock there really, then Kleavor, which I know a lot of people expected, and I thought a Hisuian Pokemon was likely, but what could the last one be? Whoa, it's Entei!
Holy cow!
Oh my god!
Say what?
Well, that absolutely floored me. I did not see Entei coming, and the episode comes to an end with Hamber reporting to Master Gibeon that the cogs have begun turning once again, and wow, what an end to the first chapter of Pokémon Horizons. I'm not really used to shows being separated into chapters, but this felt like the season finale of part 1 of Pokémon Horizons, and so much happened during this episode, I barely even know where to start. I'll start with the new information we learned in this episode, and while we learned a lot about the explorers in this episode, there's clearly a lot more for us to find out. Previously, the Rising Volteclers had just hinted at the explorers being a notorious group, but nothing more than that. Now, Diana mentions that they used to be Lucius's friends, which gives us way more questions than it does answers. It gives a little more credence to my initial crackpot theory about Master Gibeon being some long-dead person's conscious being uploaded into a supercomputer, and maybe this guy used to be around at the same time as Lucius, which is how the explorers have survived into the modern day. But still, what exactly is Diana and Hamber's relationship? Why are the admins part of the explorers? What exactly are their goals? We know Amethio had questioned Hamber on some of this, and I gotta say, Amethio is becoming one of the more interesting characters to me in Horizons. Even though he's a villain, I can't help but root for the guy. He doesn't really seem evil, it's more misguided, or just caught up on the wrong side of a conflict. He always fights fair, and he has his own goals and ambitions, and him losing to Freed in this episode makes me feel sympathetic for Amethio. Like, how is he supposed to stop this unexpected dark Terra Blast? He and Freed are rivals, and Amethio is the underdog in that rivalry, so I can't help but consider him to be a rootable villain. That's exactly the opposite way I feel about Sango, which I have already touched on. Whether it's her talking in the third person, blowing stuff up, or saying she's bored all the time, she gets on my nerves, which is fine because it means she's a villain I actually want to see lose, and that's exactly what happened in this episode. This actually brings me to my rating, believe it or not, and I'm giving this episode a 7.5 out of 10 rating. While this episode was one of the most exciting ones thus far in Horizons, there were some things I didn't like. The Rising Volteclers pretty comprehensively beat the Explorers in this episode, and while Liko and Roy defeating Zerk and Onya is no big deal, what about the way Freed just stomped all over 3 admins? I mean, Charizard was getting demolished by Ceruledge only to completely turn things around and win easily, which I guess I have mixed feelings on. I liked that, and I didn't like it at the same time. But the way Cap heroically saved the day and took out both Sango and Onyx's ace Pokemon, yeah, that I definitely did not like. What a way to build up these new characters as credible threats by having one of them get O-code and the other one just blow up after Sango lost her cool. I don't know, I guess this just kind of made Onyx and Sango lose their mystique a little bit, like they just lost 2-on-1. Amethio did better, and he even fought fairly with the 1-on-1. The other aspect that I wanted to bring up in regards to my rating is that I think this is an episode that will only get better in retrospect. What I mean by this is that so many little details were hinted at in this episode, and that set the stage for the future. I think that as the series progresses and we learn more and more about these characters and their backstories and their personalities, then I'll look back at this episode more fondly. But for now, while I have way more questions than I do answers, I feel confident in my 7.5 rating because it just didn't blow me away like one of Sango's explosions. But like Freed said, now the fun really begins, and since I don't have a better place to put this, I'll use this time now to bring up how weird it was that Freed was rolling his R's in the Professor Freed segment at the end. I have no idea what the point of this was, but maybe one of you could tell me why down in the comments. The last thing about this episode that I want to discuss is the shocking reveal of the 6 heroes. My guesses from a few weeks ago were definitely off base, although it is odd to me that Lucius had his 6 heroes and Terapagos, but whatever. Alright, let's set our sights on the future, and the first preview we'll discuss is the one for the next episode. It'll be another one based around a day aboard the Brave Asagi, which has now gotten a lot more interesting thanks to Diana and Terapagos joining the party. It's sure to be a much slower paced episode than this week's, but I can't wait to learn more about these 2 characters and see Terapagos in action. And we'll be seeing plenty of Terapagos in action in the near future, because now that the Liko and Roy set off chapter is complete, it's time for the Gleam of Terapagos. And while I have nothing to say about this key visual, I have plenty to say about the special preview that they released to hype up this next chapter, so let's get into it. I can't really play it for copyright reasons, but this trailer had the new opening as background music, which is exciting. The premise of this next chapter is going to be Liko finding the rest of the 6 heroes. Cleavor is probably going to be in Sinnoh, but I have no idea where any of the others are going to be. I mean, Entei being in Johto is probably a decent guess, but Lapras and Rayquaza could be anywhere, and regardless of where they might be, I'm sure the explorers will be close by. I don't really have much to show you with this screenshot since I can't tell what Pokemon this silhouette belongs to, but it might be Roy's next capture. It also looks like we're going to see some more of Dot in action, which I am a big fan of, and now here's that belt that Diana picked up earlier. Liko's going to wear it, and I wonder if that will make Lucius's Pokemon obey her or something. Regardless, the first chapter of Horizons is in the books, and it finished with a 7.28 average rating for me, so I have high hopes for the Gleam of Terapagos to be just as good, if not better. In my script for this part, I wrote down, "That's all I have to say," but if I'm being honest, this script is 7 pages long, so I have had a lot to say this week. Hopefully that makes up for my abbreviated review in the last episode. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I'd really appreciate it if you could like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time.